My name is Megan Whitmore, and what happened to me took place on the morning of March 17, 2016. I've been quiet about it for a long time, not because I was afraid of being called crazy, but because I didn't know if anyone could truly understand. Even now, putting this into words feels like trying to describe a sound to someone who's never heard anything before. I was living in Lincoln, Nebraska at the time, working part-time at a small library downtown while taking care of my younger brother, Jacob, who has autism. That morning had started like any other, brisk, gray skies, the usual Midwest chill. I remember making Jacob breakfast, laughing when he asked if we could skip school and work to go visit Jesus. He says stuff like that all the time, little phrases that sound almost prophetic in hindsight. On my drive to work, something fell off. There was this dull ache behind my eyes, like the warning hum before a power outage. By noon, I collapsed. Doctors later said it was a sudden cardiac event, rare for someone healthy. I was gone for just under 4 minutes. But in that span of time, something far greater happened. Something I've never truly come back from. I remember the exact moment it began. The pain and noise of my body completely vanished, like someone flipped a switch. 1 second I was staring at the spinning ceiling of the library, voices shouting my name, and the next, I was standing in stillness. There was no ceiling, no library, just this endless, overwhelming calm that wrapped itself around me like an embrace. I wasn't floating or walking, I was just there, surrounded by a light that wasn't harsh or blinding, but alive. It was as if the light itself had intention, personality, love. It knew me, not just my name, but every thought, every wound, every failure, and every quiet act of love I'd given without ever expecting anything back. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't confused. I felt like I had come home after wandering in the cold my whole life. I was not alone in this place. I couldn't see faces, not in the way we see each other here, but I felt their presence, figures made of the same light that surrounded me. They weren't floating or standing. They just were, and their presence filled me with the kind of peace I can't even begin to describe. I understood, somehow, that they were angels, not with wings or harps, but with eyes made of eternal knowing. They didn't need to speak. When they looked at me, I felt entire conversations pass through me. I knew I was safe. I knew I was loved. But I also knew I was about to be shown something important. It started with what I can only call a review, not a judgment, not a test, but a reflection. They let me feel my life, not just see it. I was back in my childhood home, holding my mother's hand as she cried silently in the dark after my dad left. I felt her pain, not from memory, but from her. I was in the passenger seat the night I told a friend something cruel during an argument. I felt her confusion, the knot in her stomach. I felt the hope I gave an old man at the library when I helped him find a photograph of his wife from 1962. I had forgotten all about that moment. God hadn't. Every second of my life echoed with impact. There were no small things. And every face, every word, every choice rippled through time in a way that only made sense there, in that place beyond time. I felt the weight of my indifference. I felt the healing in my kindness. I wept, not from shame, but from awe. I had no idea how much I mattered, how much we all matter. And just as I thought that maybe this was it, this beautiful unraveling of everything I'd ever known, the light around me shifted. It dimmed slightly, not with darkness, but with seriousness, like a sacred hush before something important is spoken. That's when the vision began. It started slowly. At first, I thought I was just seeing the world as it is, the cities, the rivers, the faces of strangers and children and tired workers. But something was off. The air looked dense, like it had been drained of color. I saw cities I didn't recognize, buildings that stretched too high, flashing signs that screamed instead of spoke. People moved quickly, but their eyes were hollow. They passed each other like ghosts, each glued to a screen, hunched over, disconnected. Families sat together at tables, not speaking, all lit up by the cold glow of their devices. I felt the ache of their loneliness. I saw marriages falling apart not with yelling, but with silence. Children growing up in houses where no one was home, not emotionally. And then, things escalated. Governments started to collapse, not with one big explosion, but slowly, like bricks falling out of a wall until the whole thing buckled. People turned on each other, neighbors, communities. The world fractured into tribes. Everyone was against everyone else. There were protests and fires and screaming, but also a deeper war, the kind fought inside the heart. I saw people abandoning compassion, mocking forgiveness, calling good weak and evil freedom. There were leaders standing in front of nations, speaking with authority, but I saw that their mouths were full of ash. Lies were currency. Power was poison. And still, no one turned back. No one paused to ask what they'd become. And then came the real war, not the one with soldiers or tanks, but a spiritual collapse so violent it broke into the physical world. I saw cities reduced to rubble. I saw children digging through trash for food. I saw a sky so gray it looked dead. And in all of it, I felt the weeping of heaven, not because we were being punished, but because we had chosen this. We had turned away. But what struck me the most, what kept me from losing hope in that moment, was that even in the darkest parts of the vision, there were sparks of light. I saw tiny groups of people gathered in circles, praying in whispers, holding each other through storms. I saw mothers teaching their children how to forgive. I saw strangers laying down weapons to help the wounded. I saw old men opening their homes to children with no family. And every single act of love, no matter how small, burned like a fire through the darkness. Heaven had not abandoned us. God was still watching, still waiting. There was time. Not much, but enough. The angels around me never said a word, but I understood their message clearly. This vision was not a sentence, it was a choice. A warning. A cry from a loving father begging his children to come home before it's too late. I began to weep, harder than I ever had before. Not for myself, but for all of us. For the people I'd seen who didn't know they were lost. For the generations growing up in emptiness, starved for love. For the souls walking blindly toward destruction, thinking they were free. I begged to stay, to do something, to fix it. And that's when the light began to pull away. The warmth faded, and I felt gravity again, heaviness, breath, pain. I opened my eyes in a hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and cold fluorescent light. But I knew I had not come back the same. The first thing I remember feeling when I came back into my body was weight. It was like someone dropped an entire world on top of my chest. My eyes were open, but it was hard to breathe. The hospital room was cold, sterile, full of machines and strangers and beeping sounds that made me feel like I had been buried alive under reality. A nurse called out my name and a doctor stood over me, looking relieved. They told me I'd been gone for a few minutes. They called it miraculous, but they didn't understand. Nobody did. I wasn't happy to be back. I wasn't relieved. I was shattered. Because everything I had just seen, everything I had just felt, the love, the clarity, the beauty, was gone, and I was suddenly back in this broken world with all its noise and numbness and forgetting. I remember staring at the ceiling and trying to blink it away, thinking maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was some hallucination caused by lack of oxygen or stress. But the more I tried to forget, the more it refused to leave. The emotions were still in me. The knowledge was still with me. I felt like I was carrying something inside my chest that didn't belong in this world, like a burning star in a paper bag. The things I saw weren't just visions, they were real. They were more real than the 4 in my arm, or the rough hospital blanket, or the bruises on my skin. And with that realization came a kind of quiet fear. What am I supposed to do now? The days that followed were not peaceful. Everyone around me treated it like a miracle, something to celebrate, and of course I was grateful to be alive, but I didn't feel like I had survived something. I felt like I had been sent back with a burden. It was like walking around holding a secret that was too heavy to carry, but too sacred to throw away. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not my mom, not Jacob, not my best friend Kelsey, who sat by my bed every afternoon reading my favorite books aloud. I just couldn't. Every time I opened my mouth, I felt like I'd break down crying. I'd go to sleep at night and feel myself aching for that light again, for the presence of God, for the warmth that had wrapped around me like a promise I wasn't allowed to keep. And the vision, I couldn't get it out of my head. I'd see it when I blinked. I'd hear echoes of it when I passed by a family fighting in a grocery store or saw the headlines on my phone. Another war, another tragedy, another leader making empty promises with a grin. I started going on long walks just to feel something again, just to process it all. I'd walk past people laughing at their phones, or arguing in their cars, or ignoring their kids, and I'd feel this desperate sadness welling up in me, like I had been dropped back into a sinking ship with no life rafts. And yet, there was still this small, burning thread of hope pulling me forward. I had seen light. I had seen mercy. I knew the war wasn't the end. But I also knew we were closer to it than anyone wanted to admit. Eventually, I broke down and told my pastor. His name was Reverend Bill Tully, and he'd known me since I was 12. I asked him to meet me at this little cafe near the edge of town, and I sat there with shaking hands, trying to explain something that even I couldn't understand. To his credit, he didn't laugh. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. And when I finished talking, probably an hour later, he said the most unexpected thing. He said, "I believe you." I was stunned. He told me he'd read other accounts like mine before. He said God often uses people like me, people who don't think they're qualified, people who don't have a platform or a spotlight, to carry his messages, because we're the ones most likely to deliver it in humility. That hit me hard. I wasn't anyone special. I wasn't some saint or scholar or influencer. I was just a girl who'd seen something no one wants to talk about. And yet, maybe that was the point. Reverend Tully encouraged me to write it all down, not just for others, but for myself. He said writing would help me keep the vision clear and grounded, so I wouldn't lose it to the noise of life. That night, I started journaling everything I remembered, every detail, every feeling, every wordless message. It poured out of me like water breaking through a dam. And as I wrote, something began to shift in me. The pain of coming back slowly started to turn into purpose. Over the next year, I became obsessed with understanding what I saw, not just through prayer, but through scripture. I read Revelation with trembling hands. I looked at Isaiah and Ezekiel through new eyes. I saw patterns I'd never noticed before. Warnings, promises. The vision I was shown wasn't just some abstract spiritual dream. It was rooted in God's word. I began to realize that the war I saw wasn't just physical or political, it was moral. It was the collapse of the soul on a global scale. But it didn't come out of nowhere. It started when we stopped loving each other. when we turned inward and upward in pride, when we made idols out of comfort and ego, when we traded grace for attention, holiness for popularity. It all made sense. The technology in my vision, how people were glued to their screens, empty-eyed, addicted to noise, that was now. That was us. I saw it every day. I was seeing prophecy unfold in front of me like a slow-motion car crash. And I started asking myself, what am I supposed to do with this? Am I supposed to shout it from the rooftops? Am I supposed to just live differently and hope people notice? Or am I supposed to sit in silence and wait for the next instruction? The answers didn't come fast, but I started praying for boldness. I asked God to give me a voice that could carry the truth, not in judgment, but in love. And slowly, opportunities began to open. I started sharing my story, slowly, with people I trusted, at first just in small groups, at women's Bible study or youth nights at church. Every time I spoke, I could feel my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. But then something strange happened. People didn't recoil. They didn't mock me. In fact, they leaned in. Their eyes would water, their faces would go still, and by the end of each talk, there would always be someone, sometimes several people, who came up to me and said, "I've felt it too. I've seen something. I've known something is wrong, but I didn't know how to say it." It was like I had opened a door that had been waiting inside them all along. And slowly, I realized that this wasn't just about me sharing a vision. It was about God reaching people through a shared ache, a common hunger. We're all starving for truth. We're all exhausted from pretending we're fine while everything falls apart. We know deep down that the way we're living isn't right, that something has been lost, something sacred. And when people hear that someone has seen heaven, has felt God not as an idea, but as a reality more solid than brick or bone, it does something to them. Not because I'm special, but because He is. I was just a mirror reflecting back a little of His light. And in doing so, I began to see how many others were carrying that same light and didn't even know it yet. There was one night I'll never forget. Our church held a small worship night out on the edge of town, at an old farm field that the local families still used for events. I was asked to share my story. It was late September. The air was cool, and the stars were clear above us. I stood on a makeshift wooden platform, with nothing but a microphone and a lamp, and I told the truth. All of it, from the moment I left my body to the moment I came back. I spoke about the vision, about the war, about the brokenness I saw rising like floodwaters through every part of our world. And I spoke about the love of God, so deep and furious and patient, that it still waits for us even now, even while we curse Him. And when I finished, there was no applause, just silence. And then I saw something I hadn't expected. People were on their knees, sobbing. Old men with calloused hands. Teenagers clutching their Bibles. Mothers rocking their kids with tears streaming down their cheeks. It was like a dam broke open. Not in me, but in them. Something I said, or maybe something the Spirit did through my words, reached into their chests and pulled out the truth they had buried for years. That night, dozens of people gave their lives to Jesus. Not in some emotional hype. Not because of me, but because they remembered something. Because for a moment, they saw what I saw. And in that moment, I understood why God had shown me what He did. It wasn't to terrify people. It was to wake them up. But here's the thing. They fell asleep again. Not all at once. Not overnight. But slowly over time, like embers dying under ash. I saw people who had cried out in repentance go back to their old habits. People who swore they'd change drifted back into comfort. And I don't say that to judge them, because I've done it too. It's hard. This world is loud. It makes you forget. It makes you doubt what you saw, what you felt, what you know is true. And the devil doesn't always come with a pitchfork. Sometimes he comes with convenience, with busyness, with distraction. He'll fill your calendar, your phone, your mind, until there's no room left for the still, small voice that once called you home. I began to feel that tension again, the same weight I felt after I came back. Except now it was heavier, because I'd seen the hunger in people's eyes. I'd watched them remember God, only to fall asleep again. I'd seen light break through, only to be buried. And I kept asking, Lord, what now? What do I do when even after they've heard the truth, they forget it? And the answer didn't come as thunder or prophecy. It came in the form of a whisper. Don't stop speaking. Even if they drift. Even if they forget. Even if no one listens. Don't stop speaking. Because someone will. Someone always will. And even if only one person wakes up, it's worth it. Because heaven rejoices over the one. And that one might carry the light farther than I ever could. So I kept going. I started traveling to nearby towns, sharing my story at schools, churches, retreats. I spoke to anyone who would listen. I talked to people in coffee shops, on buses, during layovers at airports. I got strange looks, sure. Some people dismissed me. Others smiled politely and walked away. But then there were those moments, the ones that still give me chills, when someone would go completely still, their eyes wide, and they'd whisper, "I felt that too." I just didn't know what it meant. One time, a woman grabbed my hand so tightly I thought she might crush it, and through her tears she told me she'd tried to take her own life a year ago and begged God for a sign that He still saw her. She said my story was that sign. I'll never forget the way she looked at me, as if I wasn't me at all, but something God had placed in front of her like a flare in the dark. And I realized something important that day. I don't need to save the world. That's not my job. My job is to shine the light I was given, even if it's just for a second. Even if it's only seen by one person standing in the fog. Because I know now that every second counts. Every moment of love, every act of courage, every word of truth, it echoes beyond what we can see. Just like the kindness I showed that old man at the library all those years ago, something I'd forgotten completely, but God hadn't. Nothing is wasted in His hands. Nothing. There came a moment when I had to stop asking, why me? And start asking, what now? I had spent so long doubting myself, questioning whether I was the right person to carry this message. I'd tell God, I'm not a pastor. I'm not a speaker. I don't even have a theology degree. Why would you pick someone like me to deliver something this big? But the more I walked this path, the more I understood. It's not about qualifications. It's about obedience. God doesn't use the loudest voice or the fanciest platform. He uses the willing, and the broken, and the scared. He uses the ones who have been shattered by His presence and still choose to follow Him. And I realized I wasn't supposed to be perfect. I was supposed to be honest. That honesty, my trembling voice, my unpolished words, my tearful confessions, that was what people needed. They didn't need another polished sermon. They needed someone who had been there. Someone who had tasted both the sweetness of heaven and the bitterness of earth, and still chose to hope. That's what I became. Not a preacher. Not a prophet. Just a witness. A vessel. And the more I leaned into that, the more peace I found in the mission. It wasn't about being strong. It was about being faithful. Every time I opened my mouth to share what I had seen, I felt the fear melt into something holy. Like I wasn't speaking alone. Like the same light that wrapped me in that other place was wrapping me again, giving my words power far beyond my own. But the weight of what I saw never left me. That vision of the Great War still plays in my mind like a reel I can't turn off. And it's not just about explosions or global politics. It's about something deeper. I saw a collapse of truth. I saw people laughing at righteousness and praising corruption. I saw children raised without love, without boundaries, without God. I saw people calling themselves free while becoming slaves to pleasure, to pride, to apathy. I saw entire cities darkened not by shadows, but by despair. And I could feel the sorrow of heaven, this unbearable grief, not of anger, but of longing. Like a parent watching their child walk into traffic while refusing to look back. That's what hurt the most. God wasn't standing over the earth with rage. He was weeping. I saw him reaching out again and again, offering mercy. And we kept turning away. We thought we knew better. We wanted to be our own gods. And it led us to ruin. But in that ruin, there was still time. I keep coming back to that. The war wasn't final. It was near, but it hadn't consumed us yet. There were still moments, fleeting but real, where love broke through. Where people forgave, where they turned back, where they remembered who they were and who made them. That's the part one cling to, because it means it's not over. Not yet. One evening, after sharing my story in a small church near the outskirts of Wichita, a young man came up to me. He was probably in his early 20s, eyes red from crying, hands stuffed in his hoodie pockets like he was trying to hide from the world. He waited until everyone else had left before he approached. I'll never forget what he said. I don't know if I believe in God, but I believe you saw something. And if there's even a chance that what you saw is real, I want to change before it's too late. We sat in the pews for over an hour, talking about his life, his anger, his addictions, his loneliness. And by the end of it, he didn't just walk away with belief. He walked away with hope. He said the moment I described seeing people reconnecting, holding each other in prayer amidst the chaos, that hit him the hardest. Because he'd never had anyone hold him like that. And now he wanted to be that person for someone else. That was the power of the vision. Not that it made people scared, but that it made people remember. Remember what we're meant for. Remember who we belong to. That night, as I sat alone in my car afterward, I wept. Not out of sadness, but out of awe. Because it hit me that God was still moving, even in the smallest places, even through someone like me. The war might be coming, but the resistance, this spiritual revival, had already begun, one soul at a time. I started to see patterns too. Certain types of people responded most deeply to the story. Those who had suffered, those who had been crushed by the world, those who had tried everything else and still felt empty. It was like the brokenhearted could recognize something in the way I spoke. They didn't need proof. They just knew. One woman, a widow who had lost her son in a car accident, told me that my story helped her let go of her anger toward God. She said she'd spent years feeling like heaven had betrayed her. But when I spoke about the angels, about the life review, about how nothing is wasted and every single moment is seen, she said something in her heart cracked open. She began to believe that maybe her son wasn't gone forever, that maybe he was seen, that maybe there was still a home waiting for both of them. These weren't dramatic encounters. They weren't filmed or posted or shouted about online, but they were real, and they added up. Every story, every soul, every breakthrough, tiny threads in a bigger tapestry God was weaving through my obedience. I began to realize that even though I couldn't stop the war I saw, I could be part of the rescue. I could be a lighthouse in the fog, even if I never saw how many ships I saved. Eventually, I reached a point where I couldn't go back to living a normal life. I tried for a while. I went back to the library, shelved books, answered phones, made small talk about the weather and local sports scores, but something inside me had changed forever. Every moment felt heavier, more sacred, more urgent. I'd find myself staring out the window while someone was talking, thinking about the vision, remembering the sorrow in the eyes of the angels, the silent warning humming through every image I'd been shown. I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unfeel it. And more than anything, I couldn't keep it to myself. It wasn't just a calling anymore. It was a responsibility. It was like God had set something in my chest and said, "This is not just for you." And I knew I had to act like it. So I quit my job. I packed up my things. And I started traveling full-time, visiting churches and schools and community centers, anyone who would listen. I didn't have a big ministry backing me, or a brand, or even a website at first. I just had my story, and a God who kept opening doors every time I stepped forward. Sometimes the crowds were big. Sometimes it was just a handful of people in a basement with folding chairs. But every time, someone needed to hear it. And every time, I felt that same holy fire rise in my chest when I spoke, not because I was confident, but because I knew what I was saying was true. There's one night I still dream about. It was in a small town in Tennessee, nothing more than a dot on the map, where a friend of a friend had invited me to speak at a youth rally in an old barn that had been turned into a church space. The night air was thick with humidity, and the wooden walls creaked with every breeze. I was nervous. It was mostly teenagers, and I didn't know if they'd care. But the moment I started speaking, something settled over the room. I told them everything, about the moment my heart stopped, about the light, about the life review, about the vision of the world falling into chaos. I told them how the war starts inside us, not on the battlefield. I told them that every choice matters, every act of love or cruelty echoes beyond this life. And as I spoke, I saw something I'd never forget. Kids who had walked in joking and slouching were now sitting straight, faces pale, eyes wide, some of them crying silently. And when I finished, they didn't clap. They just stood there, still, quiet, moved. That night, over 30 of them came forward for prayer. Some confessed things they'd never said out loud before. Some begged for forgiveness. Some just knelt down and wept. And I knew right there in that rickety barn with no stage lights or fog machines that the kingdom of God had come close. I could feel it like a heartbeat in the air. And I remember whispering under my breath, "This is why you sent me back." But not every night was like that. Some nights were hard. I got mocked, called a liar, called delusional. People told me I was making it all up for attention, for pity, for money, which was laughable considering I was living out of borrowed guest rooms and eating off gas station sandwiches most weeks. But the criticism didn't sting the way I thought it would, because I knew what I'd seen. I knew who had shown it to me. And once you've stood in that light, once you felt the presence of God so closely that it melts every fear and falsehood inside you, you stop needing the approval of man. That doesn't mean I didn't get tired, though. I did. There were months I felt like giving up. Like maybe I had misheard. Maybe I had done all I could and now it was time to stop. But every time I came close to quitting, God would send someone broken, someone searching, someone desperate, and they would sit across from me, sometimes shaking, sometimes silent, and say, "Tell me what you saw." And I'd know the mission wasn't over, because the war was still coming, and the warnings hadn't all been heard. And maybe, just maybe, one more voice, one more story, one more seed planted in someone's heart that could make the difference. So here I am, years later, still carrying the same fire, still telling the same truth. Not because it's easy or glamorous or even because I enjoy the spotlight. I don't. I'm just a woman who saw what most people only wonder about. And it changed me. It made me desperate for others to wake up, to remember, to come back to the God who made them. Because if you could see what I saw, if you could feel what I felt, you wouldn't waste another second. You'd stop chasing things that don't matter. You'd forgive faster. You'd speak kinder. You'd let go of pride, of bitterness, of fear. You'd look strangers in the eye again. You'd love without condition. You'd live, not just survive. That's the heart of my message. Not fear, not doom, but awakening. We're running out of time, but we're not out of hope. Not yet. That's why I speak. That's why I go. That's why I'll keep telling this story until my last breath. Because someone, somewhere, needs to hear it. Maybe that someone is you. There's something I need you to hear, whether you believe everything I've said, or whether you're still unsure, still on the fence, still wrestling with your doubts. That vision I was shown wasn't just a dream or a hallucination. It wasn't a story I invented to comfort myself or scare others. It was a message, a warning, yes, but more than that, it was a plea. A pleading cry from heaven itself, echoing across time and eternity into the hearts of anyone willing to listen. I saw what happens when we keep turning inward, when we silence the voice of God with the noise of pride, distraction, and false independence. I saw how easily we forget the things that matter most. I saw the slow decay of human goodness, not because people were evil, but because they became numb, busy, self-consumed. And that numbness, the cold, quiet kind, is what begins the collapse. I saw families pulled apart not by disasters, but by years of unspoken words. I saw children raised without love, men and women trading sacred vows for empty validation, people giving up on hope because they forgot they were seen, known, and created with purpose. I saw the war begin long before a single shot was fired. And I saw it being fed every time someone chose bitterness over forgiveness, isolation over compassion, fear over faith. But I also saw the way out. It was never through force or politics or power. It was through return. Return to truth. Return to humility. Return to God. I saw that even in the depths of chaos, God hadn't turned his face away. He never stopped loving us, never stopped calling. The angels who showed me the vision weren't grim or angry. They were grieving, yes, but also hoping. They were watching us like a parent watches their child take their first steps across a busy street, praying they make it, praying they hear the warning before it's too late. And the incredible part is we still have time. I don't know how much. I wasn't given a calendar. I wasn't told the hour or the year. But the urgency was real. I felt it in my bones. And I knew it was soon, not distant, not theoretical, not someday. The war is already here. You can feel it, can't you? In the division, in the confusion, in the way everyone's talking and no one's listening. In how we tear each other down online for sport. In how we laugh at things that should break our hearts. In how we isolate, numb, perform, pretend. The signs are all around us. But so is the invitation. God is still reaching out. Still speaking through stories like mine. Not to scare you, but to wake you up because there's still a choice. And the choice is yours. I wasn't sent back to fix everything. I wasn't sent back to start a movement or create a religion or collect followers. I was sent back to speak, to remember, to carry the flame of what I saw and pass it on like a candle lit in the dark. I've been doing that ever since, one person at a time, one town at a time, one broken conversation at a time. And I'll keep doing it until I see him again, until that light surrounds me for the last time, and I finally get to go home for good. But for now, I'm still here. And I need you to know this. You are loved. You are seen. You are made for more than what this world tries to sell you. God has not given up on you. He is waiting, calling, longing, not to condemn you, but to welcome you home. He's not asking you to be perfect. He's asking you to turn. Just turn your heart toward Him. That's it. That's the first step. And once you do, you'll start to feel it too. That quiet pull, that deeper knowing, that spark of light that will never, ever go out again. You don't have to see heaven to believe it's real. Sometimes all it takes is hearing someone else say, I was there. And I came back to tell you. So, if you're still here, listening, breathing, and feeling something stir inside your chest, don't ignore it. That stirring isn't just emotion. That's God speaking to you. That's Him knocking on the door of your heart, not with guilt or shame, but with love, with purpose, with arms wide open. Don't wait for the world to fall apart before you wake up. Don't wait until the storm comes to start building your foundation. He is offering you peace right now. He is offering you freedom, healing, truth, life. You just have to say yes. So please, wherever you are, whatever you've done, however far you think you've fallen, turn to Him. Right now, pray, cry out, whisper if you have to. He hears you. He always has. And if this story did anything for you, even a little, if it opened your eyes, or your heart, or reminded you of something you forgot, don't let that moment pass. Act on it. Seek Him. Pick up your Bible. Reach out to someone you trust. And if you feel led, share this video with someone else. Not for me, for them. For the one who might be standing at the edge right now, just waiting for a reason to come back. Be that reason. Be that light. Be that voice that says, I've seen what's coming and there's still time to turn around. Because there is still time, but not forever. Choose Him while you can. I did, and I will never regret it. If this story moved you, please don't keep it to yourself. Like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment below about your own experience with God, or your questions, your fears, your prayers. You're not alone. There is a growing family of people who are waking up, and you're one of us now. God bless you. Stay strong, and stay in the light.